When I moved to the countryside, I thought I'd escape control and unreasonable rules. But I was wrong. Just one day in, I realized I was mistaken. A group from the HOA, assuming they had the right to interfere with my life, blatantly prohibited me from using my own private road because of some ridiculous rule. And it didn't stop there. They even put metal spikes in front of my driveway, ready to cause harm. The HOA isn't a community. It's an organization of power-hungry people, always looking for ways to force their control and destroy personal freedom. If you're interested in dramatic stories about power, corruption, and the battle to protect the community, don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any updates. When I first decided to move out to the countryside, I thought I was escaping everything. No more loud neighbors, no more nosy people, and no more absurd rules telling me what I could or couldn't do with my own property. I imagined a life filled with peace and tranquility, just open land stretching out as far as the eye could see. It was supposed to be the fresh start I had been longing for. But little did I know, my idea of serenity was about to be shattered by an unexpected nightmare. It wasn't long before I met Karen, a woman who seemed to have nothing better to do than police everyone else's lives. I had just pulled into my new driveway when she showed up unannounced, clipboard in hand, a scowl so permanent on her face that it looked like it was carved into her skin. She immediately marched up to me, her eyes narrowing at my truck. "This road is for residents only," she snapped. Her voice was cold, like a knife cutting through the calm air. "You can't just drive on it like it's your personal highway." I raised an eyebrow, taken aback by her audacity. "Excuse me, I live here. This is my property," I replied, trying to make it clear that she had no right to lecture me. "My land, my drefevoi, my riles." But Karen wasn't having it. She crossed her arms, glaring at me like I had committed some unforgivable crime. "No," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "All roads in this community fall under HOA jurisdiction. You need to submit a request for access, just like everyone else." I couldn't believe my ears. She was serious? This road was built by the previous owner, and I owned it outright. The HOA had no say over it. I shook my head, laughing at the absurdity of it all. "You gotta be joking. This is private property, Karen. Your HOA has nothing to do with it." Karen, however, wasn't ready to let go. With a tight-lipped smile, she tapped her clipboard and warned, "If you don't comply, we'll have to take further action." I couldn't take her seriously, so I waved her off and slammed the door of my truck behind me, hoping that would end the matter. But I couldn't have been more wrong. The next morning, I walked outside to find something that made my blood run cold. There, at the end of my driveway, were metal spikes sticking out of the ground, gleaming menacingly in the early light. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was seeing things. But nope, there they were, metal spikes like something straight out of a police chase. I couldn't believe it. Karen had gone from annoying to outright dangerous. She had turned my peaceful life into a battlefield, and I was furious. Enraged, I stormed over to Karen's house, my fists clenched, ready to confront her. She opened the door with a smug little smile, sipping her coffee like she had all the time in the world. "Can I help you?" she asked, feigning innocence. "Are you out of your mind?" I shouted, pointing back at my driveway. "You put spike strips in front of my house. This is illegal. You can't just do that." Karen didn't even flinch. She took a slow sip of her coffee, completely unfazed. "Well, I did warn you," she said casually, as if she had done nothing wrong. "It's criminal damage to property. Not to mention, what if an emergency vehicle needed to get through?" I was seeing red. "Are you serious? You just put my life in danger for no reason." I was seething, struggling to keep my cool. But Karen just shrugged, as if it were all some sort of joke to her. "Rules are rules," she said dismissively. "If you have an issue, take it up with the HOA board." That was the last straw. I wasn't going to let this slide. I didn't care if she thought she was untouchable. She was about to learn the hard way that she had just picked a fight with the wrong person. I pulled out my phone and took several pictures, documenting every angle of the damage. Then I made one call, my lawyer, Jake. As I sent him the photos, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Are you kidding me?" he asked. "She really did this? She can't get away with it. This is vandalism and reckless endangerment. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. No, she can't. Make her regret every second of this. The morning after I confronted Karen, I thought maybe, just maybe, she would get the message. I was wrong. Dead wrong. As I walked out my front door, there it was again. Those damn spike strips gleaming under the sun, now reinforced with concrete. She wasn't satisfied with just a few simple metal spikes. No, she had to make sure they were there for good. This woman had gone off the deep end. It wasn't enough for her to make my life miserable. Now she was putting people in danger for her petty little power trip. I couldn't believe it. Was she seriously so obsessed with controlling everything that she'd go this far? Who in their right mind would dig into someone's driveway and cement metal spikes into the ground? Apparently, Karen. I immediately snapped more photos, knowing that this wasn't just a prank anymore. This was a crime. I marched over to Karen's house, fury building up with every step. I knocked on her door, and as soon as she opened it, I could already see that smug, condescending smile creeping across her face. She looked as though she had won some sort of victory. "What's wrong now?" she asked, acting like I was the one causing trouble. I almost lost it. "You put the spike strips back, and this time you cemented them in. What is wrong with you? This is insane." Karen didn't even flinch. She took her time, sipping her coffee like she was on vacation. "Well, it's not my fault you don't follow the rules," she said coolly, as if making my life a nightmare was some kind of justifiable action. "You can keep complaining all you want, but the HOA has every right to ensure safety around here." I couldn't believe how delusional she was. "You're literally endangering people's lives with this stunt. This is not about safety. It's about you trying to control everything." She just shrugged, not an ounce of regret in her expression. "It's not my problem if you don't like it. Rules are rules." This woman was a lost cause. I wasn't going to sit back and let her destroy everything I had worked for. I called Jake, my lawyer, and told him what had happened. His reaction? "Are you serious? She cemented the spike strips into the ground? That's insane. That's criminal damage and endangerment. No question." I didn't need any more confirmation. This was the last straw. It was time to hit Karen where it hurt. Legally. I'm going to make her pay for this. She's taken it too far. Jake promised to handle it. "Don't worry, we're taking this to court, and we're going to make sure she never pulls something like this again." The next day, I had a feeling that Karen was about to get a big wake-up call. As soon as I stepped outside, I saw her. She was standing by the spike strips, her arms crossed over her chest, staring at me with that same arrogant look on her face. It was clear that she thought she had one. She thought she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. But what she didn't realize was that things were about to turn against her. I walked up to her, trying to keep my cool, but I couldn't hide my anger. "Karen, this is private property. The HOA has no say over what I do here. This is not your playground, and you need to stop playing these games before it gets ugly for you." She tilted her head, acting as if I was the unreasonable one. "You're just mad because I'm enforcing the rules. The community voted on this. You don't get to just do whatever you want here." I laughed, shaking my head. "The only thing you're enforcing is your own control freak tendencies. You're not above the law, Karen." That afternoon, I had a visitor, and this time, it wasn't just Karen's empty threats I had to deal with. No, it was the sheriff. Apparently, Jake had already sent a letter to the HOA, threatening legal action, and they didn't want to deal with the fallout. The sheriff showed up to handle the situation once and for all. Karen's smug attitude immediately crumbled when she saw the officer. "Ma'am, we received a complaint about the illegal spike strips on this property," the deputy said, his voice steady and official. "You need to explain why they're here." Karen tried to act innocent, but I could see the panic in her eyes. "This is a community issue," she said, her voice shaking just slightly. "The HOA has every right to—" The deputy cut her off. "No, they don't. This is private property. These spike strips are illegal, and you need to remove them immediately, or we'll escalate this." I stood there, arms crossed, watching as Karen's face turned red. The deputy gave her one last chance to comply, but it was clear she had nowhere to hide. She was caught, and she knew it. I had to admit, watching Karen struggle to remove the spike strips was oddly satisfying. She huffed and puffed, Her face twisted with frustration as she had to dig up the concrete-reinforced spikes herself in front of the entire neighborhood. People gathered around, whispering, some even pulling out their phones to record the whole thing. Karen, once the queen of the neighborhood, was now just a pathetic figure, digging up her own mess, humiliated by her own actions. As she worked, I couldn't help but smirk. The woman who thought she could control everyone was now completely exposed for the petty tyrant she was. This was only the beginning, though. Karen hadn't learned her lesson. In fact, I had a feeling this was far from over. But for now, I was enjoying the show. The morning after Karen was forced to remove the spike strips, I thought it was over. But as usual, Karen didn't know when to quit. She showed up on my property again, standing there like she owned the place, arms crossed, staring at me like I was the one who had wronged her. Her face was twisted into that same smug expression I had grown so tired of. It was clear she wasn't done with me. "You really think I'm going to just walk away after everything you've done?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I was absolutely furious. Karen rolled her eyes. "You're so dramatic. It's just a couple of spikes. They weren't even that dangerous." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you kidding me? You could have killed someone with those. And you're acting like it's no big deal." My voice was shaking with anger. She just shrugged, as if she had done nothing wrong. "Maybe you should learn to follow the rules. This community has standards. I'm just making sure they're enforced." The more Karen spoke, the more I realized she wasn't just some random busybody. She had a sense of entitlement that was off the charts. She honestly thought she had the right to control everything, like she was the queen of the neighborhood. And apparently, she wasn't planning to stop anytime soon. "I'm not going to sit around and let you keep doing this," I snapped. "You've already caused enough trouble. If you keep pushing this, it's not going to end well for you." Karen's eyes gleamed with defiance. "Go ahead. You think you can just bully me with your lawyer? You can't even get the HOA to listen to you. They voted for me to enforce the rules, not you." I couldn't believe how twisted her logic was. "Karen, the HOA can't control my property. Your rules don't mean a damn thing here." She smirked again. "We'll see about that." That night, I noticed Karen's car parked outside my house again. I was starting to feel like a prisoner in my own home. The next day, I woke up to the most ridiculous sight. Karen was standing on my property, holding yet another clipboard, like she had some kind of authority. She wasn't even trying to hide the fact that she was here to make my life miserable. "What do you want now, Karen?" I asked, feeling the frustration building in my chest. "I'm just making sure you know that the HOA is still watching you," she said, almost smugly. "You're not getting away with this. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what a troublemaker you are." I was beyond irritated. "Are you out of your mind? You're literally wasting everyone's time with your obsession. Just leave me alone already." Karen smiled coldly. "No, I can't just let you get away with breaking the rules. You think you're above everyone else? Think again." I knew it was time to take things up a notch. Karen wasn't going to stop unless she was forced to. I called my lawyer, Jake, and explained what had happened. His response was blunt. "She's really testing you, huh? Well, we're taking this to court. She's not going to win this battle." I felt a small bit of relief, knowing that I had Jake in my corner. Make her regret ever thinking she could get away with this. Jake laughed dryly. "Trust me, she'll regret this. Big time." It didn't take long for Karen to realize she was in over her head. The day after I had called Jake, she was out there again, standing by my driveway like nothing had happened. The spike strips were gone, but she was still trying to act like she was in control. She looked at me with that same smug look on her face, clearly not understanding the gravity of her actions. "Karen, are you really this stupid?" I said, walking up to her. "You've already messed with me enough. You've lost. The HOA has nothing to do with my property. You can't control it, and you're going to lose everything." Karen's smug smile faltered for just a second. "I don't know what you think you're going to do, but I'm not backing down. The HOA voted for me to enforce the rules, and that's what I'm doing. I'm not afraid of your lawyer or anyone else." "Don't say I didn't warn you," I said, my voice cold. "You've pushed me too far." The moment came when Karen realized she was completely out of options. As I stood there watching her, I heard the familiar sound of a police car pulling up. The sheriff had arrived. I couldn't help but grin, knowing this was the turning point. "Ma'am," the deputy said, walking up to Karen. We've received a complaint about illegal road hazards on private property. Care to explain? Karen looked like she was about to have a meltdown. She stammered, trying to come up with some kind of defense, but there was nothing she could say. This is a community issue, she tried, but her voice was shaky. The HOA has every right to... The deputy interrupted her. No, ma'am. The HOA does not have any authority over this property. You've created a dangerous situation, and now you need to fix it. If you don't comply, we'll have to escalate the situation. Karen's face drained of color, and for the first time, I could see the fear in her eyes. I didn't mean to. The deputy gave her no sympathy. You've already broken the law. Now you're going to pay for it. After Karen was forced to remove the spike strips, I thought for sure she'd get the message. But of course, Karen wasn't the type to back down. Not by a long shot. It didn't take long for her to show up at my house again, this time standing by the end of my driveway with that same arrogant look on her face. She was still holding her clipboard like she had some kind of authority. I couldn't believe she was still trying to make my life miserable. I walked up to her, seething with anger. What now, Karen? Haven't you done enough? She gave me that smug, infuriating smile. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'm not going to let you get away with breaking the rules. I'll make sure everyone knows you're a troublemaker. I was done trying to reason with her. You really are something else, you know that? You're obsessed with controlling everyone. What's it going to take for you to leave me alone? Karen shrugged, like she was completely justified in everything she was doing. I'm just doing my job. You're the one who's out of line here. Karen was clearly not backing down, and I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't about to let her ruin my peace and quiet. I called my lawyer, Jake, and told him what was going on. He wasn't surprised. She just doesn't know when to quit. Huh? Fine. We'll take it up a notch. We're going to make her regret this. Yeah. Well, I'm done with her antics. Let's go after her legally. I snapped. This is harassment at this point. She's taken it way too far. Jake agreed. We'll put the pressure on. I'll contact the HOA and let them know what's going on. They can't let her abuse her power like this. I knew it was time to hit her where it hurt. Legally. The HOA wasn't going to protect her this time. Karen had overstayed her welcome. It was time for her to face the consequences. The next morning, I woke up to find Karen standing outside again, this time with an even bigger attitude. She was standing by my driveway, clipboard in hand, watching me like I was some kind of criminal. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to show her face again. Karen, are you serious? You've lost. Just leave me alone. I yelled, already feeling my temper flare. But she didn't care. She just stood there, acting like she had all the power. I'm not done with you yet. The HOA is behind me, and I'm going to make sure you follow the rules. You don't belong here. I shook my head, disgusted. You don't get it, do you? You don't own this place, Karen. Your little HOA can't control my property. You're just a bully with a clipboard. Karen's expression twisted into something ugly. You think you can just throw your weight around because you have a lawyer? You're just making things worse for yourself. It was becoming clearer by the minute. Karen's power was slipping away. The more she pushed, the more people started turning against her. When the HOA finally received a formal complaint from my lawyer, they had no choice but to step in. Karen had crossed the line, and even the HOA couldn't ignore it. A meeting was called, and Karen tried to rally support from the neighbors. She walked around, knocking on doors, collecting signatures, all in an attempt to gather enough support to go against me. It was pathetic. Please help me. This man is a threat to our community. He's refusing to follow the rules, and now he's bringing in lawyers and the police. Karen pleaded, desperation in her voice. I couldn't help but laugh. You're the one who's causing all the problems. No one's supporting you, Karen. They're tired of your nonsense. At the meeting, Karen tried to play the victim, but it didn't work. The HOA president, a man who had always been fair, was quick to shut her down. Karen, are you seriously suggesting that you're the victim here? After what you did, you installed spike strips on someone's private property. That's not enforcing the rules. That's harassment. Karen's face turned red with fury. I had to do it. The rules were being broken. No, Karen, the president said, his tone firm. You overstepped. The HOA doesn't have jurisdiction over his property, and you know it. The room was silent as the other residents looked at Karen with cold, judgmental eyes. For the first time, Karen realized she was completely alone. By the end of the meeting, Karen's reign of terror was officially over. The HOA stripped her of her power. No more clipboard. No more fines. No more ridiculous rules that she tried to impose on everyone else. She was done. The once feared HOA enforcer had lost everything. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Told you this wouldn't end well for you. I muttered under my breath as Karen sat there, fuming with anger. Karen stood up, her fists clenched. She stormed out of the meeting, her face twisted in rage. "This isn't over," she hissed under her breath. "I'll make you regret this." The next day, I heard shouting outside my house. I walked out onto my porch, and there she was again, Karen, standing in the middle of the street, yelling at the neighbors. "You're all turning against me? After everything I've done for this community? You think this outsider belongs here?" She shrieked, her voice filled with rage. One of the neighbors, an older man named George, had had enough. "Karen, you've made everyone miserable. We're done with you," he said, shaking his head. "You've ruined everything for everyone here." Karen's face twisted in fury. "You'll all regret this," she yelled as she stormed off, her voice trailing off into the distance. I stood there, arms crossed, watching her retreat. I knew this wasn't over yet, but it was clear that the neighborhood was no longer afraid of her. Karen had lost her power, and with that, her ability to torment everyone was over. For once, I felt a sense of peace. The nightmare was finally coming to an end. I should have known it wasn't over. I'd finally gotten Karen off my back, or so I thought. The next day, I woke up to a situation that sent my blood boiling. My truck was gone. Just gone. I couldn't believe my eyes. I rushed outside, frantically looking around, but there was nothing. I ran inside to check the security footage. Sure enough, there it was, Karen, in the middle of the night, standing next to a tow truck, smirking as she watched my truck being hauled away. I felt my chest tighten. This woman had the nerve to go this far, after everything that had already happened. I immediately grabbed my phone and dialed the sheriff. "Hey, I need to report a stolen vehicle. I know exactly who took it." The officer on the other end didn't waste any time. "We'll send a unit out to you right now. Don't go anywhere." I was beyond livid. Karen had crossed the line, and this time, I wasn't just going to let it slide. When the sheriff arrived, I showed him the footage. He watched it in silence, his frown deepening with every second. "So, she took your truck without your permission? That's theft, plain and simple," the deputy said, his voice tight with disbelief. I could feel the tension in the air. Karen thought she was untouchable, but now, I had her right where I wanted her. "I'm not letting this go. Let's go get my truck and deal with Karen once and for all." The deputy nodded. "We'll head to the impound lot and talk to whoever's in charge. We'll get your truck back." We arrived at the impound lot, and there it was, parked behind a locked gate. My truck, safe but stolen in the dead of night by Karen. I couldn't believe I was here, about to confront the person who thought she could get away with everything. The man working at the lot came out, wiping his hands on his coveralls. He frowned when he saw us. "Can I help you?" he grunted. The deputy didn't waste time. "This truck was illegally towed off private property. We're here to get it back." The man scratched his beard, clearly annoyed. HOA lady said it was an unauthorized vehicle. We were just doing our job. I couldn't keep quiet. Unauthorized according to who? You don't get to just tow someone's truck without permission. I have legal proof that this is my private property and the HOA has no say here. The man reluctantly nodded. "If you've got proof, I'll release the truck. But you're still going to have to pay the impound fee." I wasn't having it. The deputy cut in. "This truck shouldn't have been towed in the first place. If you want to avoid charges for participating in an illegal repossession, I suggest you waive the fee." The man threw up his hands in defeat. Fine. Take it. Just keep that crazy woman away from me." With my truck back in my possession, there was only one thing left to do: confront Karen. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I marched up to her front door, my blood still boiling. The deputy was right behind me, clearly prepared to put an end to this nonsense once and for all. Karen opened the door, and when she saw the deputy standing next to me, her smug expression vanished. She tried to act like everything was fine, but I could see the panic in her eyes. "What is it now?" she sneered, trying to act innocent. I held up my phone, playing the footage of her standing by the tow truck, watching my truck being hauled away. "You stole my truck, Karen," I said, my voice cold and steady. "You think you're above the law? That's grand theft auto." Karen's face went pale. No, that's not what happened." She stammered, but she could tell she was losing control. The deputy stepped forward. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for vehicle theft." Karen's mouth hung open, like a fish gasping for air. "What? This is ridiculous. I was just—" The deputy ignored her protests. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." I couldn't help but smirk as I watched Karen's world crumble around her. She thought she was untouchable, that she could do whatever she wanted, but now the truth was out. She was about to face the consequences of her actions. The entire neighborhood was out on their porches, watching as Karen was led away in handcuffs. People whispered to each other, some even pulling out their phones to record the scene. It was a satisfying moment, watching the woman who had made my life hell for so long being treated like a criminal. She was no longer the queen of the neighborhood. Now she was just another person being carted off by the police. Karen's face twisted in rage as she was forced into the back of the squad car. "You'll regret this," she screamed. "I'll get a lawyer. I'll sue you all. You haven't heard the last of me." I crossed my arms and leaned against my truck, watching her tantrum unfold. "Good luck with that," I called out. "I already have a lawyer, and he's a lot better than yours." The deputy slammed the door of the squad car, cutting off Karen's screams. It was over. Karen had lost. She had pushed me too far, and now she was paying the price. In the days that followed, the HOA quickly distanced themselves from Karen. They made official statements, claiming they had no involvement in the illegal towing incident. But none of it mattered. Karen was gone, stripped of her HOA membership, facing multiple charges and fines. She had no more power, no more control over the neighborhood. As for me, life slowly returned to normal. The stress, the drama, it was all behind me. I could finally relax, knowing that Karen was no longer a threat. The quiet, peaceful life I had moved here for was within my reach once again. It felt good knowing that I had fought back and won. The neighborhood was finally free of Karen's toxic influence. And as for her, well, she was going to have to live with the consequences of her actions for a long time.